different meetings tonight, and we'll try to get the show on the road. Let's start with the zoning board meeting. Can we call the meeting to order and call the roll? And Nathan, you got it.
Carlson.
Here.
Elsesser.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Kaplan.
Here.
Sater. Absent. And Rowan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
The first item is the zoning board minutes. And actually, I think we have in here, looks like, is it the fence meeting? Yeah. First item is reviewing and approving or not the minutes. But the first thing I actually have in here in my packet, maybe I did something wrong, is the fence minutes, and we probably shouldn't do those till we have our fence meeting, right?
Apologize.
The other minutes are here. I haven't, like,
They're in there? Okay.
Yeah,
So-
my packet has the correct
All right,
one, so maybe that was an error.
Okay. So is there a motion with respect to the fence, with respect to the zoning board minutes?
This is for 375 Adams?
It's the July 10 meeting. So we have to,
Okay.
the drill is to have reviewed them and then approve, or maybe is it, yeah. So is there a motion to approve?
motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. So then, we have two new items for the zoning board. The first item is a public hearing to consider a request of Molly and Mike Aquilino for a floor area ratio variation for a proposed rear two-story addition of 375 Adams Avenue. This is one that should seem familiar to everybody because they were here and we approved it to the tune of 11%, but they have 4% more. I have that right?
Correct.
So everybody that's going to speak, you're standing there. For the Wagodas and anybody who wants to speak on the Wagoda thing, which is next, we're going to swear everybody in at once. So is anybody here for the Wagodas? Okay. So we're going to swear everybody in all at once, and you're going to get sworn in now for the next thing.
Okay, so do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will be providing in this matter will be true and complete?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, not that I want to give you the bum's rush, but do you have anything else you need to tell us?
No, just to reiterate, we're just increasing the roof, or not increasing the roof, we're rebuilding the roof in order to make it satisfactory from a physical and structural standpoint.
And you know, we've, like I said, for the purpose of folks who weren't here, we reviewed this last time. We were okay with the whole thing last time. The staff identified a glitch in the request. It was too small, so we said, okay, come back. Everybody okay with that? Is there a motion with respect to this?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Carlson.
Yes.
Elsesser.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
And Rowan.
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your project. Good luck.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to come back twice. The next item is a public hearing to consider a request of James and Beth Wagoda for an east side yard setback variation for a proposed one-story rear addition at 707 Sycamore Lane. Everybody wants to come up? Come on up and tell us who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Gary Wagoda, the attorney for James and Beth Wagoda, my nephew and wife. And
can I ask a question? This is totally unrelated.
Sure.
But I grew up with someone named Michael Port.
my close cousin, his daughter is getting married in a few weeks. I'll be at that wedding. And,
I knew he was half Wagoda, and you know, nobody from Glencoe ever leaves.
No. And his mom, my Aunt Mickey, still lives in Glencoe. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen I talked to him, you know, 5, 10 years ago. He was living in Wisconsin at the time, but I haven't seen him, so I don't need to recuse myself. All right, tell us why we should do this.
I'll turn over to the architect in a second, and Mr. Jeffrey Letzer, his firm is the one who's doing this, and this is Jim Wagoda. His wife couldn't be here tonight. Doing this, they make a very tiny addition to a house that they're redeveloping interior-wise, redoing the back room in order to make it more livable and usable, since their family is about to get bigger, and they could use a little more space and make the house usable. And at that, I'd let the Mr. Letzer describe it for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. We are looking at putting an addition onto an existing portion of the home. The existing portion of the home that's currently there is existing non-conforming currently. We are proposing to add a 2-foot addition to the back of this structure and repair some of the existing structural elements that are attached with this piece. So the variance that we are looking for, the side yard setback in the zoning district, is 12 feet. The current conditions there are 11.48 feet. So we're talking a 6¼ inch variance for a 2-foot addition we're looking for. One other item that's currently on the property, if you're looking at the site drawing, currently there is a kind of a shed element that's also on the east side of this property. That is 6.31 feet to that same side yard setback. We are in the process with all the construction, we're going to be removing that. So we're also taking down an existing non-conforming. That's actually kind of the worst piece on that east side property, and we're going to remove that. And that's actually 9 feet in distance. That's into the setback, the north to south run of it. So we looked at various design options of adding to this room and kind of reducing this last 2 feet to conform to the zoning setback. But unfortunately, it really kind of throws off all the symmetry in the space of the room by doing that. So that's where we felt we'd like to ask for this variance to continue this existing structure for this 2 feet of addition.
Nathan, what's the maximum variance that we would be allowed here? I mean, they start with a non-conforming use. This says this is 4%. What's the maximum?
The maximum is for a setback is a 20% reduction.
So we are safely inside even the maximum.
Yeah, I think they're yes, correct.
Anybody want to ask any questions?
And we evaluated this based on the addition because in the application that they provided us, they noted that they would be removing the shed, and we were going to hold that as a condition.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Carlson,
Yes.
Elsesser,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Rowan.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your time.
When I see my cousin, I'll certainly.
Tell Michael I said hello. He used to whip my ass in tennis regularly. But I deny that. Okay. I don't think anybody's here. Is there a public comment from anybody with respect to the zoning board who's not on the agenda? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that concludes the zoning board. Next, let's do the fence board. Let's call the fence board to order, please. We have to take a roll call again.
Carlson,
Here.
Elsesser,
Here.
Friedman,
Here.
Kaplan,
Here.
Rowan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. So this is the continued public hearing to consider a request for a fence height variation along the west property line at 278 Scott Avenue. We remember,
Just one point, sorry, you have the minutes, I forgot to note the minutes, consideration of the minutes on the agenda.
you know, right,
Is that
okay,
something
I
that we
apologize.
can
So
add?
let's,
Okay.
we do have the minutes, which were shockingly accurate. Does anybody have a motion with respect to the minutes?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
I apologize. All right, so we remember you, and, you know, you had a good presentation before, you have a better presentation now. I find this, notwithstanding that, I find this one very difficult just because of what you're asking for. Is there anything you want to tell us about what we
Yeah.
should do?
Yeah, I think, I don't know how much you'd want me to kind of go through the materials. I understand Nathan sends them ahead of time, so don't want to kind of beat.
You know, you tell us whatever you want. So we were here last time. I think everybody, Dave was here last time. And so we were here last time. We probably read it, but, you know, hit the, whatever you want to tell us.
Okay, let me take you through it. I can kind of speed up, slow down as needed. Okay, so I think based on where we were, the minutes, you asked us to kind of come back. There was some direction given by the board, specifically on, hey, can you kind of make the picture clearer? I think Deborah Carlson asked for potentially pictures. Then there were some other requests around what the kind of impact was. I think somebody asked whether or not, you know, what type of medical impact this would have on Tristan. And we went and dug up a few more supporting materials to that effect. I wasn't sure if it was Alex Kaplan or John Satter, but somebody from this kind of corner. So we dug that up. In addition, I think people were looking, we're right on the border, if you recall, of Glencoe and Winnetka. And in fact, I mentioned to you, I made the mistake of going to the Winnetka, because we have a Winnetka postcode. So it's 278 Scott Winnetka 60093. I made the mistake of actually going to the Winnetka village or town office to ask for my approval, and they were ready to give us 10. Okay, in Winnetka, and then I was directed that, you know, unfortunately, even though your post office is handled by us, we can't do this, and then obviously then kind of went through the system here. So you know, the problem, very quickly to recap again, is we're the only house at a metro station right back in a platform. And so there are many times when that train pulls in, and I don't know if you all heard about the accident that actually happened recently. We actually had a holding pattern close to 2 hours on that day. And you know, so I think it's very unique in that respect. And it comes right through. Our son's room is nearer that side of the house. And, you know, Emma she'll have her own plea. I will give her the pulpit at some point as a mother to kind of communicate that. And so this is a real hardship for us. And so we don't believe, and I think the materials were sent out to neighbors. Our neighbors are in full support of this fence. We don't believe that there's any harm done here. We've added photos in there showing, I think there were some concerns that if somebody was on the Green Bay Trail, they would see this. The difference at the Hubbardswood end of the Green Bay Trail is you're actually in a decline in grade, and so you can't actually see this fence. And there's a picture there that shows that you can just about see a chimney in the house. So, you know, so in all, we think we've kind of come back, and then we heard your concerns with regards to height, size, etc. And we worked again with our architect, along with the consultants on sound, and we believe we can bring that down to 10. Yes, go ahead.
Did you know? So you found out when you asked Winnetka to approve this that you weren't in Winnetka?
Yes, that's when I found out. I still don't get my Glencoe Anchor
Right, no,
newspaper,
you
by
know,
the way. I'm trying to get my newspaper.
This is it's a shrinking problem. There are a number of places that are on the border, and over the years, we've tried to fix it. And, you know, it was, you know, a long time ago, back when I was first on the village board, we actually gave some stuff to Winnetka just to, but I guess you're, you know, one of those exceptions.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so if you flip to your presentation, which is the PowerPoint, I can just take you through a few slides here, and then maybe take some questions, any clarification questions. So on the first page, page 2, it says, it's marked page 2 on the PowerPoint, which is, that's the one right there. We think we've summarized the case here in points 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? We don't believe that this, I know there's a concern on precedent, but you know, the graphics, and we use the GIS system and Google Maps, etc., and we don't believe there is any other house that fits this, this particular case, where you are actually at a station within 75 or so feet on the platform. The nearest we saw in Glencoe was 400 feet, you know, and that's when you kind of go to central Glencoe right here, and you kind of look, you've got all that land, you know, and which we actually asked ourselves, maybe it was just bad planning, because you've got all the land which is kind of park-like, and then you've got the church, and then you've got commercial before you get residential in central Glencoe. So there's nobody there that has the same thing. So we believe that it's not precedent setting in that respect. We have supporting material, as I mentioned, on the hardship on Tristan. In addition, we actually, when you look at I don't know how many of you got time to go out there. You're obviously all very busy with day jobs and families, etc. But the way the fence is constructed now is actually 6 plus about 4 or 5 feet of, I don't know what the type of plant is, a climbing plant of sorts. And so in aggregate, it's actually about 10, 11 in aggregate. And so we're actually saying that there's not going to be any change to the way this looks. Yes, you're going to have more wood now going from 6 to 10, but we actually think we can de-emphasize that with the right kind of foliage. And there's a graphic in there which I'll point to, where it shows that you currently actually have a fence of that height. And then we mentioned the Winnetka confusion and Winnetka precedents that we found. We found several 9/10 feet fences in Winnetka. It's very tough trying to go scope out for fences. I don't want anybody calling the cops on me, you know, trying to kind of look behind people's backyards. But we found a number. Found 4 or 5. So within the body of the presentation, I think I would just like to highlight page 5 and 6, where you see. So it's more like a Google World view of central Glencoe, and then the GIS of central Glencoe. And you can see the 400 feet radius approximately that I was describing to you on page 5. And then on page 6, you actually see that with the GIS layout of all the different buildings that are in the area. Okay? So that's kind of that number one uniqueness that we were talking about. And then we kind of overlay that with our situation on page 7 and 8, where you see 278 Scott on the Google Maps, Google World Map view, and then you see the platform, as well as station parking, etc. And then page 8 is more the GIS view of that. Okay? So again, you know, between those two, and you very quickly become Winnetka, as you can see on the southern part of that, because we're right on the border. So the brown thick line you see on page 8 is the border between Glencoe and Winnetka. Okay. So I don't know, maybe should I pause or just keep running through at this point? Keep going?
Whatever you want to tell us.
Okay, just if there are any specific questions at each section, I can kind of take them right there. The other thing we added on page 9 and 10 is graphics is pictures of when the train pulls in, where it alights, where it idles, where the house is, and the platform. And then New Look, the architects working with us, unfortunately they couldn't be here. They had something with their children for summer holidays. They've actually done a graphic here that shows how we're thinking of coming down in height here and kind of the kind of coverage that we will have. We're hoping that, you know, at 10, where you've got a lot more such fences in Winnetka, the fact that there are no precedents, this doesn't set a precedent, that us coming down and hearing you loud and clear on your concerns or on 12 would carry some weight.
So Nathan, what's the statute say in Winnetka? Do they allow more? Is their statute different than ours?
I'm not familiar with their statute.
What's the, do you know what the statute is in Winnetka?
I just know they wanted to grant it, and I've got 4 or 5 fences in
So,
here that are precedents.
Does Glencoe have, I mean, you know, we've had, I mean, there are a few fences that are, you know, front yard fences that probably were grandfathered in. We've approved sort of a gate that was 7 feet or something, which, by the way, I didn't love, but is there anything in town like there is in Winnetka with a 10-foot, 8-foot, 9-foot fence? Do we have anything like that?
The only thing that I'm immediately aware of is at the west end of the downtown business district on the south side of the street, right as the business district ends, and then there's a home. There's a ComEd substation that has, I'm not sure what the height is, but it's definitely 10 feet or more.
Okay.
Our code does allow for taller fences to screen things such as that.
So
That's one example.
And I'm assuming, just a question for Nathan, I'm assuming the substation it's probably more noise, or is it noise and optics?
I'm not sure if the intent there was for noise or likely more, at least just visual.
I have a quick question. I looked up the definition of zoning hardship, or to get a variance for purposes of zoning. And it says that a hardship for zoning purposes is a unique circumstance of the property itself, since the variation applies to the property and not the owner. Is that the same standard that we use for the fence?
So to respond to that, when you look at the issuance of variations for under the fence board, it actually does not discuss the concept of hardship, I don't believe. I'm looking at the code right now. And, you know, it does, we have, and I'm just confirming that. In general, that is correct, that the, under zoning, yeah. Yeah, so there's not actually a discussion of hardship for the fence board. You are correct that when considering whether to grant a variation under zoning, you look at the property, not the unique situation of the applicant. So what I would say is that for these, I'd look at the standards that Nathan set forth in the staff memo, really as kind of your guide star on that.
So just for clarity, are those the 4 points? Variation if granted will not alter character?
Yeah, the ones that you responded to in your presentation,
Okay.
yes.
So, you know, we're all gonna, I suppose, have different views. You've made a very excellent presentation, but it's a huge fence. It looks like Winnetka, for whatever reason, allows this kind of thing. We have one high fence, but there's a special statutory provision that provides for that. And I get why we want to have, you know, high fence, but to keep us, you know, some electrical equipment away from everybody because of noise and danger and what have you. But I continue to be troubled by such a huge variation, and you know, 10 feet's obviously better than 12 or 13, but it's still, you know, huge. And I wonder whether this is the kind of thing that the village board should do rather than us. And I regret that because I understand your point, and I particularly regret it because you didn't even know you had to deal with us. I don't know why Winnetka is more, you know, I don't know what their situation is, and I'd want to know. But
Can you just help me understand your concern? Is there some harm? Is there some, you know, where?
So I looked, right now there's a 6-foot fence and then there's a bunch of foliage.
Right.
I assume in the winter there wouldn't be the foliage, it'd be clear, and then there'd be a big fence. And the short answer is this gonna be harmful? I don't know that it's gonna be harmful, but, most fences aren't harmful, we just don't like them in town. And this one is just way bigger. And to me, I just feel, and I always want people to be able to come to the zoning board and the fence board and come out happy. That's my, I appreciate, this is about your house, it's about your child, but this is way beyond what's typically done. And my reaction now is that I think the village board has to do whatever it is that they've done in Winnetka, because it's not 7 feet, it's not 8 feet, it's not 9.
Are you?
And
But are you expecting more people?
And I don't, like I said, you've made an excellent presentation. You've done this in good faith. You're sorry you're here. Obviously, it's easier in Winnetka if somebody comes in and says we're the 4th one. I get your point. I can't be positive it's true. I get your point that this shouldn't come up again. And I don't usually worry about precedent. I don't, because I think every case is unique. But this is a really big fence. It's just, so I am troubled by it. We're not going to ruin the
one
town
of
that's
the
approved. Maybe my cohorts, I don't want you to fixate on me. John Satter isn't here. He called me to tell me that he had come to that conclusion. I told him if he was going to be voting for you, he should be here, because somebody absent is sort of like a negative vote. But he said he was inclined to vote against you, so he's not here. You may have the votes. That's just 2 of us.
Yeah, I think before you guys go ahead, I'd just like to say one more thing, and then I'll let
absolutely whatever you want.
I'll let Emma say, kind of from the mother's view. Something like this from our point of view, we're not trying to harm anybody. We're not trying to kind of go against the system or anything like that. This is real for us. We live this every day. Okay, and your reasons, and with all due respect, I don't understand. You said you don't like it. You don't like that my son can't sleep at night. You don't like that my son might have medical issues. You don't like it. It's very tough to take, to be honest with you, sir.
If I may.
Because it's not like I'm going to hurt somebody or it looks horrible. It's not even visible from Glencoe.
If I may pipe in just for a minute, I likewise drove by your house. I didn't go on your property, I promise. I had to drive back.
You can call one and take a look at your
thank you. When I took a look at, let me just state that I am a bit troubled by the height of the fence. When I took a look at the fence that you had now,
Yeah.
I thought it was in line with the character of the town. I love the foliage that's coming over from the other side. I love the yellow flowers that are on it. And I tried to imagine that fence 12 feet and then 10 feet. And granted, I'm troubled by it. And then I started researching what you gave to us. I'll be totally candid, and I hope this doesn't sound coarse. I don't believe that the issue of the child is salient. I believe it's important, don't get me wrong, but I don't believe that it's salient. I believe that the issue that has to be addressed is the hardship of the property itself. In other words, is it so unique in where it sits and how it sits in its current situation that the property itself has such circumstances that create the hardship? Judging by the fact that this train is constantly coming through and you're only 75 feet away
it
from the
stops.
train set and stops and idles, I honestly believe that the uniqueness of the property's situation vis-a-vis a very unique entity. It's not a street light, it's not traffic, it's the metro. I think that uniqueness in and of itself creates the hardship, especially with all of this noise that's generated by it. If we go through some of the other elements, whether or not there's a, whether this high fence alters the essential character of the locality, I really don't think it does. I would like to see it at 10 instead of 12, but I think, you know, as troublesome as it is, I think that passes that element. I don't believe that it's inharmonious with the general purpose of what you're trying to achieve. I agree that there's really no precedent that's going to be set here because the physical locality of the property is so unique, which creates that hardship. And I really don't believe that there's much effect on public safety or on public impact, because when I was driving over the railroad tracks to find your house, not only could I not see the fence, I missed the house. And of course, my wife, who's incredibly apt at making sure that she tells me when I'm going in the wrong direction, says, "You just missed it, slow down." So I turned around, going, in this case, this is going west on Scott. I was able to see your fence. But and I realize your fence doesn't extend so far out in its current situation to make it an eyesore. As a matter of fact, I think it's a very nice fence. I tried to imagine that fence another, 5, 6 feet higher. And as much as I didn't like it, I didn't find that image in my mind to be offensive. And then when I go through the elements of hardship, I think you meet the burden, ultimately. I don't mean this to be unfeeling, but I think all of the argument about the impact that the noise is having on the child actually becomes secondary in this situation. Even though that's your primary concern as a parent, I can understand that and appreciate that. I think ultimately the hardship is created by the unique position of the real estate vis-a-vis another very unique entity, which is the metro. And it's not just the metro going through close to the property, it's the metro sitting there and idling with each time that it goes in one direction or the other. Again, I'm a little troubled by the 10-foot fence, but ultimately when you take a look at the whole issue as well as all of the subparts, my trouble sees enough to vote in your favor in this particular case.
Appreciate that.
I would add just a personal admonishment in terms of keeping within the character of the village. The fence that you have now, I think, is absolutely lovely. I would like to, if you are going to get this passed, I'd like to see a fence come in that is equally as nice or an extension of the same nice fence. And you also brought up in one of your amendments the issue that you were considering planting different or more foliage.
Yes.
And I couldn't quite tell from your amendment whether it was on your side of the property or on the metro side of the property.
Right now.
Both would be great.
I think the problem is, once you go past the fence, we're on Glencoe property. And so there would have to be some coordination there if we were going to do more. What we have right now is, climbing, they're right on the frame of the fence, they're growing on the fence, and they make the kind of bloom, but we'd be open to any such solutions.
I think the foliage issue is a good idea. I think it'll decrease the immediate impact of the fence heading west on Scott. You know, one of the things that I noticed first and foremost when I looked in that direction is not the fence, but all of the foliage that's coming over the fence that I thought was absolutely lovely. And one of the things that I would add also is that the current fence doesn't come all the way up to the street, doesn't come all the way up to Scott. It's kind of set back enough where, again, my wife was kind enough to tell me, stop, you know, so I could actually take a look at it. And I had to literally stop on Scott Avenue and peer through my window, no binoculars, peer through my window and take a look at this fence and gauge kind of where it stops. I couldn't quite tell, which made me believe that it was set back far enough where it wasn't immediately obtrusive to the eye.
No, thank you for your kind comments, sir.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, I would be inclined to vote for this positively. I think that from a historical context, the purpose of this fence ordinance is to create a Glencoe that's not Lake Forest. A community that's closed off, where each home is its own structure and set aside and separated from everything else. And my view here is that this fence does not contribute to that issue because it's up against basically a hill, right? And so I think that I think there is a hardship, whether or not it's your child or it's just the noise and the absolute. I think that by enabling you to put this fence up, you do address a hardship and you don't violate what I think is the major tenet of the fence ordinance.
Thank you.
I agree with David.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with all. When I was looking at the previous examples prior to this meeting, the one that stood out to me the most was the one along the roads, Green Bay Road, Maple Hill Road, Dundee Road, and while I don't know the height of those, they were not 10 feet, I don't think, or 12 feet. They probably were closer to 7, 8, or 9. The hardship here is much more significant than a road, and similarly, I agree this is not going against, I think, creating an enclosed home. It's just creating backing up to reduce sound.
There you have it. I'm not going to try to change anybody's mind. I'm always happy to have people leave. I'm negative almost always on this fence thing. This one I hope will be invisible, and I would just say for future reference, we will become Lake Forest if we're not careful. I grant you, however, that this one looks unique. Is there a motion?
Are we motioning for a 12 or a 10-foot?
10.
10. That's the one.
And if there are any limits that they've offered, we should take them up on it. I don't know whether that's foliage or, but whoever wants to make the motion, since I'm voting against it.
Motion to approve the 10-foot fence. Second.
Let's do a roll call.
Carlson,
Yes.
Alcester,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
and Rowan.
No. Congratulations on your
Thank you.
fence, notwithstanding me.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good luck to you, folks.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to the baby.
Thank you.
Is there a motion? There's nobody here to talk about anything else about fences. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn the fence.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. That motion carries. We're adjourned. Last item is a meeting of the Village of Glencoe Zoning Commission for a public hearing. And we have a roll call.
Carlson,
Here.
Alcester,
Here.
Friedman,
Here.
Kaplan,
Here.
Rowan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
first item is consideration of the July 10, 2017 Zoning Commission minutes. And there was, you know, I think this might be the first time I can remember commenting on the Zoning Commission minutes. But I noted, and I had a question for our distinguished counsel, because I remembered we voted 3-2, and I thought that meant it wasn't carried, because usually you have to have 4 votes.
That was my understanding.
But it turns out, I've been instructed, that for zoning commission hearings, it's the majority of the folks present. And so it turns out that since there were 5 of us present, the 3 did. That has absolutely no consequences in the real
Right?
world, because the village board takes this de novo. But, you know, there you have it.
Which is likely the reason why the majority of members present is sufficient, because you're not the final decision makers. But I do apologize for not catching that.
So, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Before we start with the motion to approve, I'd like to suggest a change, if I could find it. Thank you. Toward the latter part of the meeting, if I'm not mistaken, and it could be mistaken, and I'll tell you why in a second, I believe I made a motion to approve with the modification that 2,500 square feet were to be used for office space and the rest of the property to be used for commercial. Now, the reason that I say I could possibly be mistaken is because I don't remember specifically. And when I looked at the tape, it was cut off before it taped the motion that I made. Now, that motion was not seconded, did not carry, but I would like it reflected that I had made the motion.
Okay with me?
That's okay.
All right, so,
The motion was to approve with, I remember there was a failed motion.
Yeah, the motion, it was a motion to approve with the condition that 2,500 square feet was to be used for office space and the remainder was to be used for commercial space. And if I'm not mistaken, the motion was not seconded and clearly did not carry. And then the vote went on to, on the petition just as it was. Yeah,
so,
thank you. If someone,
is that included in the motion we already have? Or do we need to do it again?
If there is a concurrence to add that to the minutes, then that can be the minutes can be approved on the same motion with that change, as long as there's
So,
assent.
there's a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now, sorry to keep you waiting. Public hearing to consider a request of Auto House Mercedes-Benz for a special use permit to allow on-site signage that exceeds the stated limits of the HF Highway Frontage District for the property at 1600 Frontage Road. Come on up, tell us who you are and why we should approve this. And my guess, unless something's changed, you don't need to be loquacious.
Yes. If the applicants could be presenting testimony, it needs to be sworn in.
Oh, you weren't here when we did that?
Well, it was a different meeting.
But it was only for the.
Oh, no, oh, that's right. I take it back. Swear 'em in. And nobody else is here. I apologize.
Do you swear to affirm that the testimony you will be providing in this matter will be true and complete?
I do.
Thank you.
So, and let me ask Nathan, having read the materials, what is requested here is signage that's consistent with what the village board, the zoning board previously approved for other auto dealers on that same stretch.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief history. Auto House was actually the first of the 3 car dealerships to go through the approval process and get approved. So there was a new zoning district that was created ahead of that called the RD district, which included the setbacks and whatnot that would be required for properties in that area, and also signage. So Auto House went through that process, and they met all of the requirements. I can't remember, was that back to 2000 or 2000?
2001.
2001. So they've had signage on the property since 2001 that's been in full compliance with the sign regulations that were developed for that zoning district. As CarMax and later Fields Infinity came forward, there was a bit of an evolution in the sense that both of those other dealers were requesting additional area, larger signs, miscellaneous things. There is a provision that allows for an applicant to request a zoning variation. And there is a percentage limitation on that. I believe CarMax was able to do that for some of their signs, but I can't remember. Then at some point, there must have been an amendment made that allowed a special use permit to be granted for signs that exceeded even the maximum that could be granted with a zoning variation relief. And I know for sure that CarMax and later Fields Infinity have both taken advantage of coming through, requesting that relief through a special use and receiving it. I believe the most recent was Fields Infinity for their freestanding monument sign that says Fields Infinity. And with this particular request, there is a table that was put together that highlights specifically what the relief is that they're requesting. They have a number of signs that are part of this package, but it really boils down to what we're referring to as the ground pylon sign, and I'll let Ed point out what that is and where it is. They're proposing the height of that to be larger, and they're proposing the area of that to be larger. And then the other is a series of informational signs, on-site informational signs that are slightly larger in either height or area. And I would note that I think I wasn't here, but I think when the signage regulations were first created for this zoning district, there were two types of freestanding signs that were allowed. A ground pylon sign, which was limited to a height of 8 feet, and a pole sign, which I believe was limited to a height of 20 feet or something much larger and more substantial. And they have right now a pole sign. Their freestanding sign essentially has two poles with a sign on the top. Maybe the rationale for that type of a sign when these regulations were developed before there were any dealerships was that type of a sign would attract people from the Edens more or something, I'm not sure. But since then, Fields Infinity has put in a freestanding sign that's of this similar style to what they're requesting, and staff feels that it's a more attractive type of sign, and they were granted relief for the height of that. So it's a little bit of background. Fields was, correct.
Yeah. So, and by the way, we've reviewed the materials and the elements for a special use appear to me to be covered, and so that if we end up approving this, I would sort of want to incorporate the commentary on the elements, so I don't have to. Nobody has to walk through them. Anybody have any questions? We've read the stuff. Does anybody have any questions about this? There's nobody here, and except for you, so nobody's upset about the sign. I remember when I was a kid, one of my pals, when he first saw this, thought, "Gee, are Mercedes and Toyota the same company?" It was a confusing concept at the time, but we've covered that now. Do we need to have a fulsome discussion when nobody's here, or can we just say, looks good, incorporate, and get on with it? Can we do that?
If you've determined that the materials have been presented by the applicant and the applicant's testimony and staff explanations are sufficient for you to find that they've made a case to recommend, that is sufficient for you to recommend, you can vote.
Okay.
Do these signs fall in line then with all the other dealerships up and down that street? Is that
I would
in
say
terms of size and?
the CarMax, from what I remember, they came back at one point in time and needed some relief on their on-site informational signs. But they, I believe, fell within the limits of what you could request through a zoning variation. I would say that the Fields Infinity, I know for sure that their freestanding pylon sign, which is similar to what the, Mercedes is requesting, which will be, you know, out in the front, that what they're requesting is similar. This may be a couple feet larger, but it's the same style.
So, and Nathan, you should, you told me earlier that in reviewing this, you consulted with folks that, you know, work on village planning. We have a planner that we.
Yes,
work with.
the village has had a 15-plus year relationship with Tesca Associates in Evanston for village planning services. Lee Brown is one of their principals, and he assists myself and the Plan Commission routinely on things. Due to my own workload and the content of this particular application, I did consult with Lee, and essentially I turned it all over to Lee. Ed Martinez has been coordinating directly with Lee on this particular application. Lee prepared the staff memo and felt that the signs were in keeping with the character of that district and that they were attractive in terms of these types of signs.
I mean, like I said, did folks have questions, or I don't want to.
I have a safety question, which is, do any of these signs reduce the visibility of drivers either on the premises or off the premises, such that to create any level of safety concern?
These signs all have been, other than the large pylon sign that we're increasing, they're all the same size that we started with back in '01. So we've gone through a series of corporate imaging throughout the years. We did one in 2010, where we just basically took the skins off of them and just replaced them. So this is no different than that exercise that we did. So they've been that size since the onset of the dealership. So we never had any issues with visibility.
So is it the case that Tesca would have looked at this from the standpoint of driver safety and visibility?
No, mostly making a determination for the village in terms of what the scope of the change here was, in terms of what were the sizes of what was existing versus what are the sizes of what's being proposed.
So inclusive of the pylon, none of these signs increase the level of blockage of
No.
visibility for
That's right.
drivers on or off the
No,
premises?
they're all maintain the same sight lines that they've currently had.
Okay.
So we want to make a record for the village board with respect to the elements. To me, the memoranda prepared covers each of the elements for a special use permit and shows that this proposal is consistent with village ordinances, consistent with the area where the store is located, won't interfere with anything surrounding. This is obviously not going to affect public facilities. It's not going to change traffic congestion. It's not destroying anything. It's in compliance with all the standards that apply. And it seems to me it's a public benefit if we can do something consistent with the way we want the village to look, that assists our corporate villagers. Alternative locations irrelevant here. They need to put the signs on their property, and there's no adverse impact to mitigate. So to me, this proposal is a no-brainer, meets the requirements for a special use, and I think we should recommend to the village board that they approve it. Is there a motion to do that?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second?
Let's have a roll call.
Carlson,
Yes.
Elsesser,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Rowan.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Congratulations on your
Good luck, sir.
signs. I
Thank
hope
you.
sell lots of cars.
Appreciate it.
And we get lots of sales
Lots of
tax.
revenue.
We get lots of sales
you.
tax. We need the dough.
Good night. Good night.
Thanks, Ed.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Good job. It's the first time I've ever been outvoted 4-1.
How do you feel?
You know, I'm totally fine.